For the first time in a good while, there are rumors that the UFC will finally be making its way back to Canada in 2022. Canadians will be needed to fill the undercard of these events, and this will therefore open some new roster spots for some Canadian fighters. This is good news as there are fighters all around the country who are ready to make the jump to the big leagues. Each and every year, we like to take a look at the Canadian fighters who are the most ready to compete in the UFC. So after Mike Malotte, Johan Lennes, Jasmine Jasudavicius, and Chad Analyzer last year, here are the 10 Canadian fighters we want to see signed with the UFC in 2022. I have ranked this list according to my knowledge of what the UFC is looking for in a fighter. Experience and age is a big factor, as a younger prospect with less than 10 fights will be more appealing to the UFC than a 32-year-old with 25 fights. I have also focused the list on fighters who have never fought in the UFC before. So guys who've been there like Shane Campbell and Brad Katona aren't on the list even though they are deserving of a second chance. I have also excluded fighters that are currently under contract with another major organization like Aaron Jeffrey, Olivier Aubin-Mercier, Alex Matsnais, and Arjun Boone. We're almost ready to start the top 10, but before I've got some honorable mentions, which I ranked into two categories. The first one is the candidates who could have a chance later in the year depending on their activity level, but who are likelier candidates for 2024. In this category, I've got Frederik Dupras, Zackery Powell, Dario Sinagoga, Alex O'Neill, Melissa Croden, and Saeid Mirzaei. The second category is those who absolutely deserve to be there but are less likely candidates because of either their age or the fact that they got something else going on elsewhere. For those whose age will play a factor against them, we've got Scott Hudson who is 35, Dejan Kajic who is 38, Majed Hammo who is 33, and Robert Serhiy who is 34. For those who got something else going on, I've got Anthony Romero, who would have been #1 on the list before he was announced for a fight on the PFL Challenger Series. So if he wins, he might be added to the PFL instead of the UFC. Then we've got Alex Morgan, who just lost on the Contender Series, Xavier Alaoui, who seems to have his own thing going with UAE Warrior Arabia, where he is the champion, Achilles Estremadura, who has been MIA since his Contender Series fight in 2021. And finally, we've got Christien Savoie and Pat Pitlick, who just recently came back from a lengthy layoff. So we're now ready. Let's move on with the top 10, and at number 10, it's Teshay Gouthro. It's been a hell of a rise for the fighter who began his pro career in June of 2019. He's already 7-1 after a very busy 2022, and he's knocking at the door of either a title opportunity for a big Canadian promotion or a shot at another feeder promotion like LFA or CFFC. Gouthro is already a prime candidate for a spot on this year's Contender Series, and one more win could further solidify that spot for him. At number 9, it's Tom O'Connor. Big Nasty is a veteran of the Canadian MMA scene where he's been fighting since 2014. Despite all of that, he's still quite young at 30 years old, even though he's one of the more experienced fighters on the list. O'Connor slowly but surely compiled a record of 11-2 and is now on a 2-fight winning streak. He could be looking at a unified title fight in early 2023 after his win over 15-fight veteran Devin Brock last December. With a title around his waist, he would be very tough to deny for a shot at the UFC later this year. At number 8, we've got Tony Laramie. Inactivity and tough luck have been a constant in the younger Laramie's MMA career, as he fought only 8 times in 6 years as a pro. He's had a tough time finding opponents and has had terrible lucks in terms of injuries and getting booked on events that get cancelled. Even though Tony has been able to fight only once a year since 2019, he's shown incredible improvement every time he gets in the cage, and he's way more experienced and complete than his 6-2 record might suggest. He's also only 24, so he still has all the time in the world, but with a lack of available bodies at flyweight at the regional level, he might be closer to the UFC than one might think. At number 7, we've got James Clarke. After a slow start to his pro career, the Suplex Kid teamed up with Canadian MMA legend Justin Bruckman and has never lost since. He's now 7-3 on a 6-fight win streak and fresh off a win at CFFC, one of the UFC's main feeder leagues. Like Laramie, Clarke is a flyweight who could be up for either a title shot or a fight against another top prospect, and at 28 years old, Clarke is at the exact point of his career where people make the jump to the UFC. At number 6, it's Corinne Laframboise. Like Clarke, Corinne once had a mediocre record of 3-3 in mid-2019, but she was able to turn it around and go on a 5-1 streak, where her only loss was at the hands of top contender Manon Fiorot. In her last fight, she became the UAE Warriors Women's Flyweight Champion with another first-round submission, and with an 8-4 record, She's now more than ready to compete with the best in the world at 125. We're getting into the top 5, and at number 5, it's Jamey-Lyn Horth. At 5-0, Jamey-Lyn doesn't have the biggest record on the list, but most her wins are to very legit competition as she defeated the likes of Corinne Laframboise and Jade Masson. She was set to compete on the Contender Series in 2021, but visa issues forced her to pull out of the fight. She was able to get her visa stuff sorted out as she fought in the US later in the when she won the LFA Women's Strawweight title in a dominant performance against Maria Cantuaria. There should be therefore no hurdles for a Jamey-Lyn UFC debut in 2023. At number 4, it's Serhiy Sidey. The fighter from Ontario has compiled a 7-1 record since his 2018 pro debut, and he is the current BFL Bantamweight champion. At 26, he's exactly the type of prospect the UFC is looking for to populate their highly competitive bantamweight division, and I wouldn't be surprised if Sidey's next fight was on the Contender Series, even though I'd be willing to see him defend this title once more in Canada before moving on. At number 3, it's Mateo Vogel. He's 7-2 and the current BFL featherweight champion, has a DQ loss to Xavier Alaoui, and his only other loss is to UFC fighter Damon Blackshear. He's also defeated UFC fighter Garrett Armfield, number 4 ranked Serhiy Sidey, and number 7 ranked James Clarke. All that while being one of the most entertaining grappling specialists we've seen in a long while. We need ourselves some Mateo Vogel in the UFC this year. At number 2, it's Caio Machado. This should be a formality as Machado was set to fight on the Contender Series last year before visa issues prevented him from fighting. He just needs to get these issues resolved and should be on this year's Contender Series, and that's if he doesn't get in directly for the first Canadian UFC card since COVID. He's a heavyweight, they always need new heavyweights, and he's already defeated everybody who's available in Canada, so he needs to move on. And finally, our number 1 is Mikael Dufort. Even though I believe Machado has greater chance to sign with the UFC this year, Mikael Dufort is by far the most deserving fighter who never had the chance yet. He's 10-4 on a 2-fight winning streak, and his only 2 losses since 2012 came by split decision to UFC vets Jesse Rawlson and Kyle Prepolek in 5-round title fights that both won Canadian Fight of the Year in their respective years. He's been fighting since 2012, he's highly experienced but also only 29 years old. He's in the peak of his athletic prime right now, and he's just been looking for the standout performance that will push him over the edge. My bet is that he gets this performance early this year and finds himself in the UFC before this year ends. This concludes my list of the 10 Canadian fighters we want to see in the UFC in 2023. Leave a like if you liked, and please consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.